Good evening and welcome to Athens City Council. It's Monday, June 11th at 7:01 p.m. We have a series of committee meetings this evening, and then we'll be entering into special session. And I do believe we have at least one item for amending the agenda tonight from Councilmember Reisner.
Yes.
Is that true?
That's true. I'd like to pose a question to the administration concerning our city pool.
Okay. So you want to make a motion then to amend the agenda?
Yes, as a second item.
Okay. I have
Second.
It doesn't really need a motion, so we're fine. Okay. All right. All right. So first committee is the Finance and Personnel Committee with council members Reisner, Butler, and Crowell.
Thank you, Madam President. First off, I'd like to begin talking about the payment system for the municipal court costs. After this committee meeting, we'll be going into a special session, and that will be an ordinance that will probably be introduced for the first reading. So we'll need to discuss it tonight, and I believe we have a qualified person in the audience who knows everything there is to know about it.
Good evening. My name is Tanya Dye. I'm the clerk at Municipal Court. What I am brought in front of you today is a new agreement for credit card processing for the Municipal Court. Right now it is split between two vendors. One is Chase Bank and the other is our case management provider, Courtview. There is another company, N-Court, who I've given you the agreement for, who can offer additional services at no cost to the city. Those costs are passed on to the defendants, but I believe that the additional services that they can provide would be of great benefit. So, one of the main benefits is the ability to take telephone payments, which we are not set up to do in our courtroom. And we get asked frequently every day to be able to take payments by telephone. They can also do ACH payments. They can set up recurring payments automatically. So those payment plans just automatically come out of bank accounts on a monthly basis. Again, nothing that our present service providers can provide.
Do you have any projections on how much additional revenue this system may bring in, or?
Right now, what I did tally up what our court costs are for the service fees that we pay. Courtview, we do not get any service fees. That is already being passed to the defendants. So anything on the website that people pay through our website is automatically being charged to defendants as far as the processing fees. For payments taken at the window, it is averaging about $5,200, $5,300 a year in fees that the city absorbs. In about a month, we're taking in through the bank, through Chase Bank, about $22,000 at the window, and probably about that same amount through web processing.
Okay. Just be clear on this. This is not an attempt to move away from cash and check, which, I mean, many defendants, or people that come before the court.
No, no. This is, we would still provide cash payments. We'd still provide mail service, so if they wanted to mail in a check, money order, that would all be taken care of. And we're more than happy to do that.
Okay.
It's, like I said, part of this is the ability to have that telephone option. They also serve as an extension of the court, so they can answer quick questions about if somebody calls in and it's after hours, when their next court date is. They can look into our system. It's fully integrated with our case management system.
I see.
So they can answer some of those basic questions.
Okay. Anyone on the committee have any questions on this?
No questions?
Thank you. No. I can't think of anything else. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
And the second item that I want to discuss concerns our soon-to-be open city pool. Turn to the mayor to have an explanation on, I think he's reading my mind.
I may be reading your mind.
Are we on budget?
We're pretty much on budget with the pool. We have received a number of donations and have had verbal and written commitments from others who want to donate to the pool, almost close to $30,000, which was to bring back some of the value engineering items that we had to remove to stay within budget. So that's the update on that. Mm-hmm. I would like to mention that there has been a lot swirling out there, and I had been tracking that the pool would be open tomorrow. There are inspections, though, that have yet to be done. The one by the county health department, I believe, is scheduled for tomorrow. And until those inspections are completed and we've been given the green light, that the pool will not be open. So we're still tracking later this week, in particular Saturday. But again, I do want the viewing audience to know that a lot is hinging on approval of the permits, and that's everything from fire. We had Nelsonville Fire Department here earlier inspecting with our fire department, inspecting the pool. There were a couple identified items. We feel they're easy fix items for the pool itself. And then county health department and state health department. They may be missing some other inspecting agency, but there's a number of them. So we're still fast tracking. So I do want the viewing audience to understand that the pool will not be open tomorrow. I know that that has gotten out there, and I have mentioned that in the past as well, because that's what we were tracking. But we will certainly keep people posted. I know I will be working with Scott Thompson here at the government channel to make sure that that gets out through all the media outlets, website, our Twitter account, Facebook, and other venues and mechanisms. So that's where that's at. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity to mention that under finance and personnel.
Question? Well, that wraps it up for finance and personnel.
Okay, committee of the whole. And we do have several agenda items for Committee of the Whole. The first one being the City County Health Department, Tobacco 21, and I believe Council Member Grace, as soon as she gets the microphone on. Thank you.
Yes. Excuse me. Thank you, President Nisley and members of council. This is Carrie Boyle from the Athens City County Health Department, and an area of that is of particular interest to me is public health, and so much so that I am pursuing a master's degree in public health. So when Carrie invited me to come to a meeting providing information about a particular program that's called Tobacco 21, I was very appreciative of the invite and found the information she provided to be very compelling, and have asked her to come and share her information with all of you this evening. So this is Carrie.
Great. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. So like she said, I'm Carrie with the Health Department. I'm a health educator there, also the coordinator for the Creating Healthy Communities grant. And that grant has 3 focuses, those of being increasing access for physical activity opportunities, increasing access to healthy foods, and then reducing tobacco use and also creating tobacco-free spaces. So just a little bit of background so you know where I'm coming from. If you could go to my slides now, that'd be great. Thank you. All right. We're going to jump right in and talk about what is Tobacco 21. So basically, it's just raising the minimum sales age of tobacco products from 18 to 21 years of age. And this is going to be a legislation that would make it unlawful to sell or distribute tobacco products to anyone under the age of 21. And like the slide says, it just complements and builds on existing successful tobacco initiatives. I like to know what others are doing, so I wanted to share this map of what the United States looks like right now in regards to Tobacco 21. So the states that you see in red are ones that have been working on this initiative, and then the states that have the blue filled in color are the ones that have passed it as a state, and that is Hawaii, California, New Jersey, Oregon, and Maine. And just for some fun information, Hawaii passed it as a state in 2016. So while this has been an initiative that's been around for a little bit, it's gotten a lot of traction lately. And looking at this and wondering how it's passed, it can be passed at the state level, and then depending on how the government is set up, it can be passed by a municipality or by a county. Fun fact, in Ohio, Summit County, for some reason, is the only county that can pass it as a county. Everyone else would have to do it as a municipality. And to continue talking about Ohio, I mapped out what it looks like for us. So there are 10 cities that have passed it. Those are the red dots on the map. The city of Akron just passed it a couple weeks ago, so that is not red yet. And then the ones in purple are the ones that are considering the policy in any shape or form. It doesn't mean that the city is voting on it yet. It could just mean that they are making it a priority and doing some education for it. And that would be about 19 or more cities that are working on it. So we covered the what. Now let's talk about the why. This is the best part, kind of like the meat and potatoes of Tobacco 21. Tobacco remains the leading cause of preventable disease and premature death in the U.S. Think about that for a little bit. This isn't a new conversation. We've been talking about tobacco for a long time. Tobacco use is one of the largest drivers of healthcare costs. And for Ohio, that looks like about $5.64 billion spent annually. And if you want to take that look deeper into a household level, that's about a tax burden of a little over $1,000 per household. 95% of current adult smokers begin before age 21. That's big. The age of 18 to 21 is a really critical time period when many smokers move from that experimental phase to them becoming lifetime addicted smokers. Only 5% of smokers started after the age of 21. Most likely that if we get them to the age of 21, there's a really, really small chance that they'll actually become smokers and then less likely to be lifetime addicted users. 18 to 20-year-olds purchase only 2% of cigarettes sold. But of that 2%, only 90%, let me say that again, this one's a little confusing at times. So 18 to 20-year-olds purchase only 2% of the cigarettes sold. So of that 2% sold, 90% of them are buying it to supply it to someone younger than them, meaning they've been asked or are doing it for a favor, etc. So 2% isn't too much, but when you look at why they're buying it, it's not just for their use, but it's for younger youth. So we're almost talking about probably all the age that's in high school at that time period. We know this, nicotine changes your brain. It's definitely seen as a gateway drug. Adolescent smokers are 3 times more likely to use alcohol, 8 times more likely to use marijuana, and 20 times more likely to use cocaine. An estimated 259,000 kids now under the age of 18 in Ohio will ultimately die prematurely from smoking. They found that Tobacco 21 is actually one of the best ways to fight infant mortality, because smoking during pregnancy remains one of the most common preventable causes of infant morbidity and mortality. And actually looking at our county in Athens, 22.7% of live births to mothers that smoked at any point during their pregnancy. That's a pretty high percentage smoking rate for pregnant mothers in our county. And to continue looking at Athens County, this information is from the Ohio Tobacco Program at the Ohio Department of Health. Not sure if you're able to see it specifically, but here on the left-hand side is current adult smokers prevalence, and our county is the blue, so that's about 22%. The orange is state at about 21%, and the red is the U.S. at 18%. And it duplicates these colors for youth, with our county being 12%, the state being 9%, and the U.S. 7%. So when it comes to adults and youth in our county, we have a higher prevalence of smoking than our state and country has. And it also looks like just a little under half of youth smoke compared to adults, so that's daunting numbers. So $9.5 billion a year is what the tobacco companies spend to market their deadly product in the U.S. And looking at how they're spending that, it breaks it down into using it for signs, counter mats in stores, those little change cups, shelving displays, coupons, other price discounts. We actually, some of my coworkers, their kids are getting sent tobacco flyers in the mail, and we have a stack collecting of youth that never ever purchased tobacco, and we don't know how they got their address. But then it also thinking about too, when they're marketing youth, it can be something as little as they're putting a sign at the height of a child. So they know what they're doing. This is, they've been in it for a while. So it's a lot of money specifically marketing to youth, and this goes to show how they're spending that money. So when looking at Tobacco 21, there are a lot of people who do support it. They found that 75% of U.S. adults, including 70% that do smoke, support raising the minimum age of legal access to all tobacco to 21 years. If you ask a current smoker, they'll usually say they wish they never would have started. They don't want to continue doing this, and they would never wish it on someone else. And this past April, I actually got to speak to a OU class, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Other Drugs. It was about 50 students. They're all mixed grades, so that's anywhere from 18 and older, on the topic of Tobacco 21. I got to spend about an hour and 20 minutes with them, and it was really great. So I presented on Tobacco 21. They participated in a survey with us, and then we had really thoughtful dialogue afterwards, and they had a lot to say, and it was a lot of good things. So with this survey, I just wanted to take a couple snippets, and it's super small, I'm so sorry, about how they answered. So with this question, it's asking, would you support a local ordinance that raises the age of tobacco product use to 21? So this had 49 total responses. The red box right here is showing that 41 said they do support it, and then the blue box area is 8 said that they don't. So that's about 85-ish% that do support it, and that's all ages from 18 and older. And then 2 more questions I wanted to share real quick. We asked, do you think a lot of students on campus use tobacco products? And we had 50 responses on this, and 48 said yes, and 2 said no. So overwhelmingly, the answer was yes. They do think a lot of students on campus use tobacco. And then we asked, when you were in high school, did you have access to an 18-year-old? And we had 50 responses on this, and 46 said yes, and 4 said no. So kind of just painting the picture with tobacco use. It was really great to have them answer these questions for us. So we talked about what it is, the why. Now what can we do? Diving deep into what a Tobacco 21 policy looks like, when you want to think of the model legislation, there's a couple things you want to include. You definitely want to include all types of tobacco products. You don't want to leave any out. And that includes the very large category of electronic cigarettes that also are all of these vaping devices that have many names. You also don't want to leave the public out. You want to educate them. You also don't want to leave the stores out, so providing training and technical assistance to those retailers. You also want to make sure you have active enforcement, and you don't want to allow it to create new categories of products which would exempt them from other tobacco control laws. They found that the vaping industry is trying to find a way out of this policy so it doesn't cover them, and we don't want that to happen since that's the most up-and-coming current popular product, especially amongst the youth. And then we definitely don't want the youth to be penalized. That's not what we're going for here. We don't want criminal offenses. We don't want to go after them. Ideally, a policy would go for the store, preferably the person doing the selling. That's up for the creator to decide that, but then it's going right to the person who's committing technically the crime by selling to an underage person. And then enforcement. Talking a little bit more about this, you definitely want to designate a enforcement agency. It helps if you can to identify a dedicated funding source to help for this enforcement. You could have compliance checks to make sure this is being enforced. There's a possibility of licensing tobacco retailers or tacking it on to a license they already have. You could allow citizen complaints of violations. You can require them to have the proper signage at their store placed in different areas. And then you could also make it mandatory for education to be provided for the retailer. And a little bit more on tobacco retail licensing. This is something that some people can do and some can't. For example, the city of Columbus is actually being looked at the model policy in the whole country for Tobacco 21. It's pretty amazing. And they, to just sum it up real quick, gave it to the Board of Health, so the city of Columbus Public Health Department, and they're tying it in to a tobacco retail license that sanitarians, public health sanitarians, are going out and inspecting for. Because of the food sanitation requirements, they have the right software, knowledge, and expertise to bring this program on board. The City of Columbus also has over 2,000 tobacco retailers. So if you look at a license that's $150, you're talking a lot of money. And that money goes directly towards funding sanitarians to do this and to also provide the signage, education, etc. So it's a really nice model for them to use. Then you can look at cities like the city of Powell in Ohio that only has 4 retailers. That's not enough money to pay someone to help enforce and do compliance checks. So they are just going with good faith. The chief of police walked to each retailer, provided that education, and had a good conversation on what this new law was and that there are consequences if they don't pass it. So there's 2 polar opposites, and there's definitely a possibility to find a happy medium in the middle for what fits your city best. And talking a little bit more, this is just an example sign that the City of Columbus created that they're using. We have lots of sample ordinances to look after, but the 2 best that we are kind of wanting to lean more toward is the City of Columbus and the City of Powell, because like I said, they show 2 good opposites on the scale of what you can do for this. So now moving into the benefits. This report came out recently. It's the public health implications of raising the minimum age of legal access to tobacco products. And they have a couple predictions from it. They predict 4.2 million years of lives will be saved in kids currently alive today. There will be a 25% drop in youth initiation, a 12% drop in overall smoking, and a 12% drop in prematurity, and lastly, a 16% drop in SIDS. This is big numbers in the public health world, so this is a great report that came out. And then talking more success stories, I'm going to touch on California and Massachusetts. So Massachusetts was actually the first state that had a city that passed this, and that actually happened in 2005, with it being enacted into law into 2006. So we have some good data because that was a little bit ago. So 4 years after this legislation was implemented, smoking in Needham High, meant to mention that, Needham, Massachusetts, that's where it was passed, in their high school, smoking was decreased by 47%, and that was just in 4 years. In 2006, before the legislation was fully enforced, they had a 13% smoking rate, and then the cities around them, their neighboring communities, had a 15% rate. So then in 2010, 4 years later, the youth smoking rate in Needham decreased to 6.7, so that was 13% to 6.7, and then their surrounding communities went from 15 to 12.4, excuse me. So 13 to 6.7, and then the neighboring communities 15 to 12.4. So that shows the difference. This policy had a strong effect. And then California passed it as a state, and this was more recently in the past couple years. And they've just had a couple preliminary data come out a couple months after it took effect, 7 months to be exact. And the data show that the percentage of state retailers selling tobacco to kids under age 18 dropped significantly from 10.3% before the law took effect to 5.7%.
Wow.
So that's huge. That's half cut of who was selling underage, and that was just a couple months after it was passed. So I thought that spoke a lot to that. All right, so there's your Cliff Notes version on that. I could talk tobacco till I'm blue in the face. There's just a lot to be said. There's a lot of data, a lot of information to be shared. There's a couple videos out there I highly suggest watching, some newspaper articles, etc. So I'm happy to provide that on request if needed. But I just ask all of you to just consider looking at sample policies for this, and I appreciate your time today. And yeah, if anyone has questions, I'm open to that too. Yeah, whoever wants to go first.
If I may, which of those states had referendums, voter referendums, as opposed to legislative enactments?
So can you explain a voter referendum?
The voters vote on it?
The voters vote
As
on it.
opposed to the legislators
Yes.
rule on it?
To my understanding, the states that passed it as a state, it was usually by a Senate bill.
So there was no vote?
Correct. To my knowledge, yes. That I know. Yes.
Do you have any idea how many tobacco retailers there are in the city of Athens?
Yes. I can't give you the exact number, but the auditor has a list that have to have a cigarette retail license. So just cigarettes on that list is about 25-ish. But then you would also have to add in our vape shops, which I think would add 3 or 4. And then if a bar sells cigarettes. So anywhere from about 25 to 30, give or take on that. I know we just got a new vape shop, so I may not be current with that number. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
Is there any reason we don't raise it to 35 or something like that? I'm serious.
Yeah.
Why?
They're looking at 21 because there's actually, when you compare 18 to 21, you can think about the drinking age and then gambling. They think very serious things should be raised to the age of 21. And if you look at the data and kind of history with how alcohol was raised from 18 to 21, it had a very positive effect. So they're following along similar route with this one. I think that's how they picked 21.
Any other questions? Mayor, you had a comment?
Yes.
I do.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard of Tobacco 21.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That I think another challenge with this is it doesn't preclude someone from going to the Plains or out 50
Mm-hmm.
outside the city limits because it won't apply out there.
Very correct.
Nor would it
yes.
preclude anybody from bringing cartons and cartons into the city of Athens if you're an Ohio University student or high school senior.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I think bringing cartons and cartons in is precluded by other licensing. I mean, you cannot just sell single cigarettes as a person. I think that they shouldn't be bringing cartons in because that's kind of like bringing in cartons and cartons of alcohol and selling them. They're setting themselves up for liability, at least.
No, I understand that. And
Right. So let's just
I'm
make
just
sure
saying-
that people know that that's not legal. So don't do it, please.
Yeah, there's a lot of black market things that aren't legal.
Yeah.
But I'm just throwing that out there as a level of complexity to this
Right.
whole issue.
Mm-hmm. I think the city of Columbus is also facing that too right now. Mm-hmm.
Just to that point,
Mm-hmm.
ideally, to be most effective, something like this should be statewide, and then you have those exchanges happening at the state borders, but at least not at every municipal border. And I believe sort of the goal of the American Heart Association is that perhaps enough municipalities would adopt this, and that's what they're working on, that so that perhaps eventually it would become statewide, but at this point there's not enough support for it at the state level. But also the study from Massachusetts does indicate that while obviously the kids, the teens in Needham could go outside the city limits, there was still a dramatic reduction within the school in that community. So it's just a little bit more difficult seems to make a difference. So
Yep, that's just a good point to remind this isn't prohibition, this is just changing it from 18 to 21, so taking it away from 18, 19 to 20-year-olds, which in turn takes it pretty much off of high school campuses. So then you could say it takes it away from high school age, which is 14 and above. So that's pretty huge, in my opinion. And when you lessen the possibility of youth having access to tobacco, lessens the likelihood of them to be addicted for life, which we know costs a lot of money and has a lot of health effects. So I think it's a pretty positive policy that's shown a lot of good impact, especially for our youth, because we all care about them, right? So, there's no more questions?
Any other comments or questions? Well, thank you very much for
yeah.
coming tonight.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks. All right, we'll move on to a resolution supporting Ohio House Bill 160, the Ohio Fairness Act, and I believe Councilmember Crowell is going to speak to this.
Thank you, President Isley. Later on in our session, following our committee meetings, we will be, Committee of a Whole will be doing a one reading of a resolution in support of House Bill 160, also known as the Ohio Fairness Act. This is an anti-discrimination legislation that provides protection for LGBTQ plus people in Ohio. Unfortunately, it is still legal in Ohio to fire someone, deny them access to housing and basic goods and services simply because of their sexual orientation or gender identity or expression. So the city of Athens has a long history of being very inclusive, and we just celebrated our Pride Week and our Pride Parade this past weekend. And this support of this House bill is right in line with our overall community values. One of our primary partners in the community, President Nellis, has already written to the legislator of Ohio University, has already written to the legislature in support of House Bill 160, and the resolution from City Council will support the Ohio Fairness Act. Mayor?
I, too, have already sent a letter to Representative Jay Edwards and other senators and representatives in the state, so I'm happy to see council take this up in support of HB 160.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions or comments? No. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
That's a good idea.
All right, and our last item for Committee of the Whole is House Bill 175, a bill proposed by the state legislature about urban farming. And I believe Councilmember Fall, do you have some information on this?
Well, actually, HB 175 was supposed to have some committee meetings this week, but basically, which were canceled. But it's not about urban farming, and it's not about all the other things that the state legislature thinks are so important. This is yet another hit on home rule, because they want to go with this particular HB bill is to bypass community thought processes and other ways that the community comes together to answer questions and issues in their community. They're saying, well, it doesn't matter that your community doesn't want an urban farm or allow people to have chickens. That doesn't matter. Even Athens has had this discussion, and we have said in the past that this is not right for us at the moment. This particular legislation would say, well, tough tutus with that one. We're going to let you do it anyway. So this is yet another way that they're destroying home rule. For cities that are not charter cities, such as Columbus, home rule is essential to being able to represent our constituents and our citizens in our daily manufacture of bills and ordinances that guide our community towards being fair and equitable for all people. And when the state legislature comes in and says, well, you don't get to do that, you're going to do this, they ignore what our local needs and wants are. This is just one of them. They are talking about outlawing cities from being able to put a tax on plastic bags, which is a direct result of Athens discussing that particular question. We decided at the point that it wasn't right for us at the moment, but that should not mean that in the future that we can do that again. There's a multitude of other ways that they're destroying home rule. So one of the things I would like to see in the future is Athens grouping together with other municipalities and counties to fight more forcefully and maybe even legally about the erosion of our home rule powers. So,
Okay, thank you.
Sarah?
I was just, haven't we done that some? We've joined in lawsuits with other cities and entities in opposition to legislation that has attacked home rule, and so I concur.
I think
this is a very clear attack on home rule.
At one point, we did the cell phone. They were trying to do right-of-ways with doing small cell infrastructure without going through any sort of community accountability, I think is a good way to put it. Quite frankly, every time we do that, it's like a real piecemeal process, and they need to be warned from a larger perspective that this just isn't flying. And I'm really tired of having one resolution about this particular instance that they're taking away our home rule, and that we need to argue it from a much broader perspective. And that's what I think the municipal league needs to do, and those sort of things. And that's what I would urge our administration and council to look at in the future. So, thank you. Any questions?
Who stands to gain from this urban farming thing here? I mean, whose idea is it? Is there a legislator out there who was not allowed to raise chickens and decided I want to change the law so I can?
I think that's a good issue.
Well, one of the things that happens when the state of Ohio decides I want to take home rule away from a corporation is there is some big concern out there that's going to make an awful lot of money by having that law passed. You mentioned the small cell. Okay, there's a huge amount of money to be gained there if they could just run roughshod through communities and put up their towers. Same thing with our municipal income tax. There's a big amount of money that someone's going to gain from that. Same thing happened with fracking and injection well legislation. They want to make sure that communities couldn't do anything about it because there's a tremendous amount of money there. I don't see a whole lot of money in urban farming, is what I'm getting to. So I'm wondering, to me, it seems like it's a frivolous bill. It's ridiculous. Okay?
Yeah.
It's just stupid.
And they are doing other stupid bills, like not allowing municipalities to put a tax on plastic bags.
Well, again, there's a lot of money to be gained there. Okay, you
have
a big lobby out there who says, "Listen, I want to manufacture plastic bags.
Right.
You're trying to keep me from manufacturing plastic bags because you're going to take my market away. So that's why I don't want you to be able to outlaw them because you'll take money out of my pocket, which is the only thing that's important to them."
I think part of this has something to do with larger forces that are really pushing this preemption, the preemption of home rule across the United States. Texas, they've decided that that if you're a city, that you don't get to have a shade tree ordinance, that you don't get to tell people that they have to do certain things when they're developing the projects, that you have to put in certain trees. And so it's across the board, mostly in Republican-leaning or Republican-controlled legislatures, that they're doing this more and more down to the individual, the urban farming, the bag, the tree. And for, the small government people who proclaim that they're all about, individual freedom and such, this flies in the face of local control and local planning.
So part of the question might be for the council as the committee of the whole to consider is the information that came from the Municipal League. At this point, there was going to be committee testimony that's been postponed for now, but the Municipal League was asking concerned municipal leaders to submit written testimony in opposition to the bill. So a letter could be sent, or if
We
you
can
wanted
also
to do
put
a
this-
one-reading resolution,
Right.
or incorporate
Well, we can
what
also
you wanna
put this
do.
discussion forward as public testimony to it.
Okay,
So,
that's a possibility
yeah.
too. Sure. Okay.
So, thank you.
All right, we'll move on to Transportation Committee, and that's Council Members McGee, Grace, and Crowell. And we have some items that I believe Council Member Crowell has some information for us to present on these particular items. We have 3 items to consider.
The first item is a memorandum of understanding with the Hocking, Athens, Perry County HAPCAP about really deals with transferring ownership of the buses and vehicles to HAPCAP. And we will be having a first reading of that ordinance in the special session following committee meetings. Any comments from committee members on the HAPCAP MOU?
Is this what was briefly discussed earlier this year, that we were going to need to address this issue as far as the ownership of the vehicles?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, thank you.
As well as maintaining insurance on the vehicles. That was something that had been left out, unfortunately, when we went through this the first time. And so that's part of this amendment, is that HAPCAP will be responsible for maintaining insurance of the vehicles, building equipment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and the second item is an LPA agreement with ODOT for the Coates Run Bridge. That is the bridge on Richland Avenue, right by the Ohio University Inn and Stop and Cop drive-through. And the administration has let me know that they have worked very diligently to talk to all of the businesses in that area and work out a schedule that will hopefully be as little disruptive as possible. Mayor, I don't know if you have anything else to add on the Coates Run?
No, but I'm glad that you did bring up the fact that Jessica Dine, assistant engineer for the city of Athens, has gone through and she has met with all the property owners, or the affected property owners, and have got them to a point where they understand the need of this. This is a 1935 bridge. It's an old bridge. It's 46 feet in length, and it will, once we get to the construction phase of this, which will be in 2019, traffic will be maintained through there, but it will be, rebuilding one side of the bridge. We'll signalize that whole area, kind of like you've seen those portable stop signs, where we'll have signals up there directing traffic to go or not go. And then as one side is reconditioned, rebuilt, then we'll work on the other side.
So we'll have the first reading of that ordinance in the special session after committee meeting. And finally, we will not be doing a reading of the Richland Pedestrian Passageway project, commonly known as RP3. That ordinance, the administration has asked that we wait until next week for a first reading. And then that will have its third reading after our July recess. Andy Stone has requested that we get started with it before recess so that they can get the bid out as early as possible in the fall. This is both local money as well as ODOT money. The local money will be coming from the Storm Fund as well as the Street Rehabilitation Fund. And the money from the Street Rehabilitation Fund includes $400,000 from Ohio University. Construction won't begin until after 2019 graduation, Ohio University graduation, so early May. And it will be completed before the Ohio University move-in in late August. The plans are available on the city website, although they are still in a review stage. And Mr. Stone also indicated this is mostly 2019 monies, but he wants to get this started in the fall. Committee members, any comments? Member McGee?
Since you indicated the university was paying $400,000 and the city would be paying money from the storm fund, how much is the city paying for the project?
Mayor Patterson, do you have any information on that?
Off the top of my head, the grant was, I believe, $1.6, $1.8 million, somewhere in there. And then with Ohio University's share, I believe this is accurate, so I can get back to you on that. I believe it's somewhere around, somewhere between $500,000 and $750,000 that would be coming out of the city coffers. We did apply as well for a transportation improvement district grant, which will help offset some of that. That particular grant, you can apply for 25% of a project not to exceed $250,000. So that would kind of help bring that down if we're successful in getting that, because that was the project that we were looking at to help reduce that cost.
We do have an update from Clerk of Council from the minutes, and it's 1.1 million from the city. It's got some previously authorized design fees, so.
Thank you, Clerk of Council.
Just to follow up on that, since I'm sure that we all would like to know what the final cost of the project was, if the city's paying 1.1, I believe you said, what is the final estimated cost of the project then?
Is it the one, so it's the 1.1 and the 1.7, that would be 2.8 plus 0.4 would be 3.1 total, at least from these figures that we have right here, the math.
Right.
Any other comments? That's all we have from transportation.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll move on to our special session, so if I can ask council members to come on up, and we'll go ahead and start the readings of the ordinances. And our first item of business will be to establish a quorum. And we have all but one of our council members here with us tonight. And we have ordinances for third reading. The first one is 6618, and this is an ordinance amending Title 11, Business Regulations, Chapter 11.04, Vending, Peddling, and Soliciting, and is introduced by Councilmember McGee.
Is this for the final reading then? Okay. If I might take just a minute, I wasn't aware this was actually coming up. For some reason, I didn't get that. I would like the opportunity to go to the podium so I could address council on this. Okay. It's rather unusual, but it's been a continued discussed topic, and I did intend to have some PowerPoint. But as you know, this ordinance has been labeled a vending ordinance. From my perspective, it's not a vending ordinance at all, and I believe several members of council have indicated their possible opposition to it, or possibly that it should be tabled and put into a committee that would be examining the entire vending system. I believe the entire vending system needs to be examined. I would urge council to do that. But when we look at this one particular ordinance that is to be read, it deals with very few subjects, and I would say it is more like a use of parking spaces ordinance. So this particular amendment to the ordinance would simply do the following. It would allow the public to park in the 10 spaces that have been set aside for vendor use on Sundays. It would allow anyone to park there free on Sundays. That's the first thing it would do. The second thing it would do would be to say, basically, if a vendor does not use the parking space by noon on the other 6 days during the week, that instead of having it reserved till 4 o'clock for the non-use, the public would have the right to use it after noon. With the exception, and this was an important addition that I added to the ordinance, that if a vendor reasonably believes that he would be using that space after the noon hour, but before 3 o'clock, that vendor would have the right to basically bag the meter to reserve that space. There are several vendors who, I believe, appear occasionally after noon. The burrito buggy on occasions will appear. The other vendors, it's hit and miss, and I don't mean to attack vendors by any means, because I realize their business is dependent upon the weather, such as today there was one vendor out there with 9 other empty parking spaces, but it was certainly bad weather and nobody really wanted to buy anything from the vendors. So as a practical matter, we have just those two issues with the one kind of compromise that would allow vendors to bag the meter. I think this is absolutely fair. It protects the public's right to use public parking spaces. It protects the vendor's right to use those spaces as well, with very, very little restrictions. And it also utilizes the public parking in the best possible ways. I'm disappointed that the other, I should say that the vendors are not here, just as I am disappointed that the supporters of this ordinance are not here, because I know the vendors have, through their spokesperson, mentioned that this is taking away a certain percentage of their rights. It depends on how you look at things. If you look at the real math involved here, if you're not using something at all, and somebody takes away 20% of something, you're not losing anything. You're really not. So what this ordinance does is to say, if you're not using it, well, after noon, it's free to other people as well. So again, the math, if you say you're taking away a certain percentage, it is not doing that. It is merely saying you have to use it. If you don't use it, then the public gets the right to use it. As simple as that. So again, I think it addresses one narrow issue. Is it the overall remedy to the entire situation? Absolutely not. If we have only 2 vendors who are vending through the year and we're still having 8 spots open, that doesn't really help tremendously, but it does give something back to the public, and I think it's not an oppressive way of dealing with this. So I would hope that the council would in fact approve this.
Okay.
Thank you.
And so are you moving at this
I'm-
point to
At
approve?
this point in time, I would move for the ordinance to be adopted by council.
Adopted. Okay.
Second.
Okay. So we have a motion and second for approval. And do we have any other comments or questions from council members? Yes.
My
Councilmember
only
Crowell.
comment, Member McGee, is to reinforce what you're saying, is that I also want those parking spaces to be available for use. But I also think that I'm curious and would like to have a further discussion with vendors about their use of those spaces. And I would like to encourage the vendors to utilize as many spaces as possible during the hours with which they can be most productive in supporting their businesses. So while I agree with you, I think that this ordinance may be better titled as a parking ordinance, but there's a lot of information in here about vending. And I feel like dealing with one piece of it without dealing with the entire situation and meeting it as an ad hoc committee and really trying to hash out and making this better both for people to open up parking spaces as well as to support vending. My take is that this is a complicated ordinance that needs work in its entirety. Just my feeling.
Other comments or questions? Councilmember Fall?
Thank you. I have some concerns about the overall administration of this bill because it seems to be kind of spread over, who's going to take care of the bags, who does from the administration level, who enforces what, and who takes care of certain elements of this. It's overly complicated from my point of view, and good ordinances are easy to administer and don't have a lot of confusion about who ministers what. The other thing is I agree with Councilmember Crowell, as I get very concerned when we start picking different pieces of larger issues and try to address those sort of things. We've tried that with the parking, and now we're trying to do it with the vending, and then we're going to do it over here. And I think that we need to look at more of the whole process, and also that there are other things going on outside of vending, such as the parking survey and plan that is in process right now at the planner's office level, which will help to look at the whole thing from a larger perspective. And I think that these sort of individual atomized sort of processes are not good ways to try to get vending or parking or other issues to be able to be understandable and administered in a fair and equitable process. Thank you.
Councilmember Grace?
The concern that I have is that the vendors have purchased a permit under a specific set of rules that they purchased a permit for this calendar year, and whether they are using that or not, I feel that it is unfair to change the rules midway through what I feel is an agreement between the city and the vendors. They purchased that permit, giving them access to those spaces, and I don't feel that it's appropriate to change the terms of that agreement midway through the agreement.
Other council members? No? Okay. Yes? Mayor? Any comments? Okay. Yes, Councilmember Reisner?
Yeah, I have to admit, I've been going back and forth with this ordinance or variations of the ordinance ever since it's been brought up, and I've been going back and forth on it. In its latest version here, it's been greatly reduced from I think the original text that we saw, I think, some time ago. And consequently, its scope has been dramatically reduced. From what I can see, the time now that's on those parking spots now is that after 6, the public can park there. Is that correct?
I believe it's 4.
After 4. So essentially, we're reducing that from 4 to noon, which to me is not really much of a change. But it may be. I don't know. I don't know what the impact will be if we do that. I'm of the mind it's worth looking at. But on the other hand, I also agree with Councilmember Grace that essentially we do have contracts out there already signed, already agreed to. And when those persons took out a permit to use those spaces, it was based on the idea they would have it for a certain period of time. So it's a quandary. I'm not quite sure how to balance those two things off. But at the moment, I'm thinking that look at it as a pilot project. See what happens. See if it works. So I think I'll probably vote in favor of it.
Mayor Patterson.
I do have one comment. I'm just curious as to who's going to be doing the policing of 3 non-bag usages in a calendar year.
I've often thought if I could reply to that when
Absolutely, you can reply, because I'm sitting here scratching my head as to who on city staff is going to be going down there
Right.
to check on whether or not someone has utilized their bag before 3 p.m. or not.
I've often thought that when you emphasize a problem or a weakness in something, you actually make the problem. In this particular case, you want to say to the public in general that nobody will enforce this, or we're going to have some parking Nazis out there enforcing it at some ridiculous, opportunities. It's a general relief valve so that if we have a classic case of someone who's marking or bagging the meter on a regular basis and not using it, it will come to the attention of even city employees who are charged with dealing with the parking issues. So I would say that it's going to be apparent if somebody is misusing it. It will be apparent, and who would then actually enforce it? Well, if the parking office is in charge of issuing the bags and they have either citizen complaints or notice that somebody is misusing this right, I would hope that they, as city employees, would in fact bring it to your attention or our attention so that we could see that it would be taken care of. I would like to address one other issue, though. Ms. Grace raised the issue of changing the contract, and I really want to emphasize this. This is not changing the contract. The vendors still have the right to vend in that spot. They have the right to vend from, I believe it's 3 a.m. in the morning till 3 a.m. They have the right to vend except for the 1 hour. All this does is say, if we're giving them something, if we're giving this right to vend on the best public property in Athens, that they should use it. And if they're not using it, then let the public use it. They're not losing anything at all. We're not taking anything from them. We're saying if you're not using this, then let the public use it. So again, when you have that argument that suddenly we're changing the contract, there was an implied aspect of that contract that gave them the right to vend, that they would actually use it, that they would vend, that they would do business in Athens. If they're not going to do it, who's breaking the contract at that point in time? As an attorney, I can tell you that if they were to bring that to court, that issue to court, I think it would be a very weak issue because they still have every right that they had before. And that's why the ordinance that would allow them to bag the meter guarantees them that right. So it's a necessary safety valve as far as enforcing it. Again, I liked what Jeff said. It's kind of a pilot program to see if we can actually work something out that the public can use public property when it's not being used. Thank you.
I'd like to say, though, we're not giving them, they are paying for a certain fee, so that we have to make sure that when they purchase that fee, there were certain expectations and rules, and that if we change that in the middle of their contract, that, you know, at least we may end up having people say that that's not fair or equitable, and that they would want to renegotiate that contract. But we're not giving, it's a contractual process between the city and vendors. And I'm concerned that we are throwing a whole lot of confusion. Just listen to the conversation we've had tonight out there for not a huge amount of public good for releasing 2 or 3 parking spots when it's not even realized, nobody's even said how many parking spot has been created on the other side of the street. So I think that we need to look at the bigger picture of the uptown area, and that the fact that we are going through a comprehensive plan, we have a parking study going on, and that doing these sort of things, I would hate to come back next year and say, well, undo everything that we just did today because of all the planning that's going on right now, and that we need to do it in a comprehensive way.
Councilmember Crowe.
I just want to thank Member McGee for bringing this issue to the attention of council and for doing the work that he has done on it. I think it's a very important issue, and I think it's one that we can improve. I think it's a very complicated issue, and it will take some work. And Member McGee has put in a lot of work on it, and I would hope he would be a part of the larger solution going forward, regardless of what happens to this specific ordinance. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? All right. We have a motion and second for approval of Ordinance 6618. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Can I have a show of hands? 2. Okay. Against?
Nay.
Okay. So there are 4 council members against. So the ordinance is not approved tonight.
Surprise.
Okay. Ordinance 6718. And I would like to add a comment. Thanks for all the discussion and a lot of the planning and the work that Councilmember McGee, I would second that. So I think there's some positive things that will come out of this with the long-term planning. Ordinance number 6718 is an ordinance approving the Athens Hawking Solid Waste Management Plan and is introduced by Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, President Isley. I would like to make a motion to adopt ordinance 67-18.
Second.
Thank you. We do have District Coordinator Mr. Roger Bale here this evening. If there are any last-minute questions or concerns, if you recall, he spoke with us a few weeks back. The district has has to choose for ratification between May 1st and July 29th. Let me open up a few more notes here. If you recall, council members are in receipt of a copy of the solid waste management plan. I think if there's any other relevant data that council member needs to be aware of. Am I missing anything, council member?
I do have a few questions, and if you could answer them, that would be appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Bale.
I'm Roger Bale, coordinator for Athens Hocking Solid Waste District. Yes, sir.
Thank you, and again, I really want to emphasize, I think you do an excellent job. So these questions are mainly based on my own ignorance of the situation, but I'm kind of wary of the fact that in our recycling efforts, because of the national trend to no longer take a lot of the American products that were sent overseas, a generated income from the recycling. It's my understanding that what is now happening is that a certain degree, if not a great degree, of the items that have been recycled in Athens are now going to go into the landfill.
No,
is that not true?
No, that's not accurate.
Okay.
No, the solid waste district, I represent both counties.
Okay.
And in both counties, I need for ratification the two largest cities.
Right.
I need both boards of commissioners. And they have veto power. If you don't pass, or the city of Logan doesn't pass, or even board of commissioners, the ratification process stops right there. To answer your question, your service provider is AHRC, or Athens Hocking Recycling Centers Incorporated, which
Right.
is a nonprofit entity. They actually have a contract with the solid waste district. They provide recycling services for the 11 public drop-off sites in Athens County, and I have 11 sites in Hocking County. And we're set up for single-stream recycling. The items listed in our plan is plastics, newspaper, magazine, cardboard, office paper, steel cans, and glass, clear, green, blue, and brown or amber. And that can all be mixed together. Now that we're in single stream, our materials aren't quite as high on the recycling pyramid. They're not as clean, they're not as pure as they were when in the old days you sorted at the curb. So the markets for this stuff aren't as strong. And some of these things, I've talked to Mr. Underwood. Some of his mixed paper bales, really hard to move for a while. He was challenged to move them. I've met with him, brought some other MRF operators in, and he's been able to sell the paper, but it's not a real profit maker. The material is getting recycled and it is going to processing centers. You're right, on the nation's outskirts, the east and the west coast, there's materials that's backing up on the docks and they're not able to ship. Currently, we're still able to move the materials that I've listed in the solid waste plan. Now, one of the materials, film plastic and plastic bags, I don't know of a market that's moving that stuff right now. That's not listed in my solid waste plan. I mean, but you asked me point blank, maybe some of your bags, if they're going in there. When my last conversation was Bruce, he wasn't interested in plastic bags or film plastic, and I never had them on the signs in my stops at the 11 places in Athens County or Hocking County. But that's a small percentage of the vast material that you process and put in. But the material that is getting recycled at Athens and Athens County and Hocking County is getting processed in the Plains area. They're selling what they can sell. The glass material is a real low value. It's costing more to ship it than they're getting out of it, but we've made a commitment to do this. The EPA has mandated this on me. It doesn't matter if I make money at this or not. This is something I have to do, and I'm measured on what my diversion rate is. So we're doing better at it with single stream, but the stuff we're processing isn't quite as clean as it used to be either. Does that address the question you had?
It does, and I really want to thank you because it did clarify something for me. I understand that the recycling agency is asking for an increase of $30,000 or $40,000 in the contract, and I was kind of curious if they're going to be shifting it over to the landfill, why they would have to increase their fee so much. But I think you've clarified that it will still be recycled.
If he sends any of my material to the landfill, we have a contract problem and he has a performance bond that we're going to be in the room talking.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm not on board for that.
Yeah.
It will be recycled.
I do have one question you raised, the single stream kind of thing, is it?
It's convenient. People like it.
But if it went back to the normal bag thing, would it actually improve the recycling efforts then?
I'm going to change this analogy and offer you a landline phone in your house that hangs on the wall, and there's just one in the whole house. And if I can give that to you for $2 a month, are you willing to?
I'll take it.
I don't know that once you go single stream, there's an easy way to do that.
Thank you.
The only place I know that happened, they stopped the recycling to get everyone to notice it stopped, and then when they restarted, they started on a limited basis. But that's really tough. I'd rather not go down that road. I won't say it's impossible. It'd be really difficult.
Okay, Councilmember Grace.
Do you happen to know off the top of your head how much of an increase there was in what was diverted when we went to single stream? You mentioned that the percentage did improve. It's easier for consumers.
My 2015, okay, my numbers are district-wide.
Right.
Okay, you guys are a big part of the district, but in 2015, my ADR, which is an annual data report submitted to high EPA, showed we had a diversion rate of around 23%, a little less than 23. In my 2016 ADR, we were up to like 27.8. And the one that I just submitted, I haven't got the letter back from the EPA, but I'd be confident to say we're over 25. The federal goal from the EPA was 35%. The state of Ohio goal was 25% for residential commercial. So we're doing better at it. Right. But I can't give you an exact number. Them numbers I don't have memorized, but I can provide them to you real easy. They're in reports I haven't filed.
That's fine, thank you. I appreciate that.
And Councilmember Reisner, and then Crowell.
I think I can clear up the thing about the plastic bags and films for everybody here. I received a letter from Mr. Bruce Underwood. He's the Executive Director of Athens County Recycling Center, Inc. He says to me, plastic bags are still technically accepted by AHRC based on the contract details. However, plastic bags and other film plastics will no longer be accepted after July 1st. Official communication will be sent out through a joint effort between AHRC and the City of Athens to inform residents of this change.
So he's getting ready to shut the valve off.
Yeah, in about 3 weeks. So
On film plastic.
on film plastic bags like you get at the grocery store. Just to be on the safe side, I went to Walmart the other day to see if they were still taking the plastic bags. There's no place that you can put them in anymore. There's no little box with a hole in it. And I didn't see one at Kroger's either. So.
There is one at Kroger.
There is? Mm-hmm. Oh, when did you see it?
Saturday.
Saturday. I didn't see it.
The thing that I would say for all recycling people that's doing single stream, if you would please, just place the items as recyclable in your containers. If you have a question, call either Bruce or go to the website.
Right.
Please don't bag the material. If you decide to carry it to the site in a bag, empty the bag, the contents, because if it goes in a bag through the line, there's a human being somewhere that has to open every one of those bags to dump the contents out.
Right.
The other problem is if it's in a black bag and you can't see through it, is it trash? Is it recycling? Is it, we're concerned about the safety of the guys and gals that's working the line. So bag material is a problem. We're seeing a little bit more contamination. He may talk to you about a little bit of contamination. It's getting a little worse here lately. I don't know if people aren't taking the time or they don't care, but that's going to become an issue as labor costs go up. But
Councilmember Crowell, and then Mayor Patterson.
Just a quick question. In your listing of materials, you mentioned steel cans, but not aluminum. Was that just?
I missed that one.
Just want to make sure. Okay.
UBC, Universal Beverage Cans.
Yeah.
They're worth pretty good money.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So I figured you wanted those.
The tariffs aren't hurting us on that one. Okay.
Great.
And Mayor Patterson.
Soon will.
I just have a comment to the comment that came up about reverting back to sort recycling.
Sorted at the curb.
I used to sort at the curb. I used to sit in my kitchen window looking down as the Packer truck came by, and I would time them, and I would time the amount of time. It was typically a minute at my driveway, where they were having to sort and put in the packer truck the different things. And I would contend that from an environmental standpoint, that idle time is negated now significantly by the single stream, where they're dumping one container and not standing there and having to sort my glass going in here, my paper going here, whatever going somewhere else. So again, I would just ask council to kind of think that through in terms of emissions and emissions control from what we used to do versus what's done now.
Yeah, we used to, of course I'm old school, but we used to send out 5 trucks, 2 people in a truck. It was non-compacted. They hauled it all in loose. They're running the route now with 1 truck, I believe. So it's much more efficient, a lot less of a footprint as far as carbon footprint, but there's some drawbacks to it. I mean, I won't say it's a perfect world, but it's the way we live now.
Okay, Councilmember Fall.
Thank you for all your work and all the work of all the people who are out there on the trucks. They do really amazing job. I've had somebody come by and say, you know, the stuff was all over my lawn, and people, you know, went out there and picked it up. So I think that the people have been doing a really good job. I'd like to make 2 general comments. One, this goes back to what we were talking about before, is there's a problem with plastic bags, and they are difficult to recycle. At the same time, the legislature is imposing on the cities and communities the ability for them to be able to, the communities to be able to do something about it, such as a plastic bag fee or something. So there is the state legislature who's saying, well, you can't do anything. And here's the real life saying, well, we need to reduce those because they're really not recyclable. So that's just one thing I'd like to say. The other thing is that I get concerned that things that are environmentally positive are always expected to pay for themselves. Here we are, you know, you dump things in the landfill, you know, we never worry about that paying for itself, we pay for that. And at the same time, you know, we have the ability to be able to sort and to ship things off that could potentially make money, but it makes sense that we reduce and recycle the things that we can. So it does reduce the amount that's going in the landfill, and it does increase the amount that's going for recycling. The market right now may be poor, but you know, maybe in 2 years or maybe in November it may become better market. But it bothers me. It's always you know, the environmental things have to make money. Well, you know, personally, I think that destroying the environment should cost you money, you know, sort of thing. So I think that we're doing the right thing. We need to push on being able to reduce things that aren't recyclable, that aren't not going into and reusing that energy that represents that piece of plastic, and push back at the state level to say we want to reduce it, and the way we see being able to reduce it may be a charge. And so that coordinates and overlaps with state and federal and local. And we need to have the ability to say this is right for our community.
Okay, thanks for all the comments. Thank you for the information, Mr. Bale.
Thank you.
We have a motion and second for approval of Ordinance 6718. And just one last call, any comments from the audience or questions? If not, then we'll go ahead and have the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved.
Thank you, Mr. Bale.
Ordinance 6818 is an ordinance closing a portion of Union Street between Court and Congress on Saturday, August 18th, 2018, from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. for an Uptown art event. This is introduced by Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, President Isley. Again, I would like to make a motion to adopt Ordinance 6818.
Second?
Thank you. Quite simply, this is an opportunity brought to us by members of the Municipal Arts Commission, encouraging the city to embrace an art festival in which music and art would be the predominant focus. Thank you.
Oh, and food.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and second for approval of 6818. Any other comments or questions? Council members or administration? Comments or questions from audience? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved.
Thank you.
Ordinance 6918 is an ordinance suspending the enforcement of Athens City Code Section 13.04.10, unnecessary noise on Union Street and contiguous property to Union Street on August 18th, 2018 for an uptown art event. Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, President Isley. I'd like to make a motion at this moment to adopt Ordinance 69-18.
Second.
Thank you. And this accompanies the previous legislation that we just approved, quite simply acknowledging the need to suspend the noise issue.
Okay.
Thank you.
Motion and second for approval of 6918. Any other comments or questions by council members, administration, audience? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ordinance, the motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 7018 is an ordinance suspending the enforcement of Athens City Code Chapter 11.04, vending, peddling, and soliciting to allow vending in a designated area on Saturday, August 18th, 2018, during an uptown art event, introduced by Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, President Isley. I would like to make a motion to adopt Ordinance 70-18.
Second.
Thank you. This too accompanies the legislation we just approved, and I'll acknowledge a couple of the sections. The enforcement of Athens City Code, Chapter 11.04, vending, peddling, and soliciting is hereby suspended for said date, August 18th, from noon to 8 p.m. to allow vending in the designated art event street closure area, which is then determined appropriate by the administration. And then Section 2 acknowledges that prospective vendors shall register their name, their address, and items to be vended with the Code Enforcement Office on or before August 16th, 2018 by 2 p.m. Vendors shall be entitled to vending spots with locations determined by the event organizer. Vendors must comply with all rules and regulations established by the City of Athens. Current registered vendors shall be able to vend and locate per event organizer's discretion. And again, the last section acknowledges that vendors currently holding a license to vend on East Union Street shall be allowed to continue to operate at a time and location determined by the City Service Safety Director and the event organizer, and a $25 per vendor fee and food license permit from the Athens City County Health Department shall be established for all others per trailer. Thank you.
We have a motion and second for approval of Ordinance 7018. Any comments or questions? I see a comment from the mayor.
I just want to recognize the Athens Municipal Arts Council Commission for bringing this forward. We are looking at this event as it happens with the thought that this will hopefully become an annual event in the city of Athens to have an arts festival during the summer months.
Okay.
Thank
Any
you,
other
Mayor.
comments or questions from council members, audience? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion is approved and the motion carries and the ordinance is approved.
Thank you, President Isley.
Okay, thank you. And these ordinances for second reading, I will read through. I'll pause briefly. Somebody, if they do have a comment or question, can raise their hand. Otherwise, I will move on and just reading the titles of them. So Ordinance 7218 is an ordinance authorizing preliminary engineering of the wastewater treatment plant dewatering equipment, project number 320, introduced by Councilmember Butler. Ordinance 7318 is an ordinance authorizing a delinquent debt collection agreement between the Ohio Attorney General and Athens County Municipal Court, introduced by Councilmember Reisner. Ordinance 7518 is an ordinance authorizing engineering, construction, and construction engineering services for the Northwest Bikeway Spur, Phase 3. This is project number 296, introduced by Councilmember Katsas. And Ordinance 7818 is an ordinance amending the 2018 appropriation ordinance and is introduced by Councilmember Reisner. Now move on to ordinances for first reading. Ordinance 8018 is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a one-year contract extension with Athens Hocking Recycling Centers, Inc. for municipal refuse and recycling and declaring an emergency, introduced by all members of council. And is there someone who would like to speak or offer any information on this, or is the title good as is and self-explanatory?
I can.
Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, President Isley. Briefly, I can acknowledge the two sections, Section 1 and Section 2 of this particular ordinance. Section 1 acknowledges that the City Service Safety Director is authorized to enter into a one-year contract extension with Athens Hocking Recycling Center, and that it would be effective July 1, 2018 through June 30 of 2019. And then secondly, that the City Service Safety Director would be authorized to expend up to $1,342,206 for this purpose. Thank you.
Thank you. Ordinance 8118 is an ordinance authorizing Athens County Municipal Court to enter into a payment system agreement for the processing of court costs and is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll read the pertinent sections. Athens County, Section 1, Athens County Municipal Court is hereby authorized to enter into a payment system agreement with in-court for processing court costs. Section 2, the ordinance shall be in full force and effect at the earliest moment permitted by law upon its passage and approval by the mayor.
Okay, thank you. Ordinance 8218 is an ordinance approving an amended memorandum of understanding with Hocking, Athens, Perry Community Action Programs, known as HAPCAP, Administrator of Athens Public Transit. This is introduced by, would Councilmember Crowell speak to this?
Sure.
Or Councilmember Katsas?
Just to go over this, as introduced in committee meeting, the City of Athens would agree to transfer ownership of all current Athens public transit vehicles to HAPCAP, and also authorizes HAPCAP to purchase new vehicles as part of the designated grantee relationship and process. And while HAPCAP will be responsible for maintaining insurance on all vehicles, buildings, and equipment, listing the City of Athens as additionally insured. This ordinance would authorize the mayor to execute an amended memorandum of understanding with Hocking, Athens, Perry Community Action Programs, and shall be in full force upon its passage and approval by the mayor.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ordinance 8318 is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into an LPA federal project agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation for the Richland Avenue Coates Run Bridge Replacement Project, number 321, and declaring an emergency. This is introduced by Councilmember Crowell on behalf of Councilmember Katsas tonight.
So again, as discussed in committee, and here we have some of the financial figures we were looking for. The total cost of the project is estimated to be $1,053,877, and ODOT, through the National Transportation Act, will provide 95% of the eligible costs, up to a maximum of $685,277 in federal funds from the Municipal Bridge Program. This ordinance would authorize the Service Safety Director to enter into an LPA federal project agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation for this Richland Avenue Coates Run Bridge Replacement Project, number 321. And this ordinance is an emergency measure necessary for the preservation of the health, welfare, and safety of the residents of the City of Athens of Ohio in order to submit final plan documents to meet ODOT's schedule, and it shall be in full force and effect upon the passage and approval by the mayor.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councilmember Reisner.
So what will be the city's share of this? Is it the difference between the two figures, or is there some other costs in there?
Well, I just did the simple math on it, and I'm looking at $386,600.
Bridges are expensive,
Bridges are very expensive.
Yeah.
very expensive.
But bridges are critical infrastructure, so thank you.
And I think for so long, many of the bridges have been not inspected and kept up as they should be throughout the state and our area. So there's a lot of need for bridge repair.
And I
There
might
is,
add
but-
that our engineer has done an excellent job of making sure that our bridges, I think we have maybe six or seven, and he's done an excellent job of marching us through, I think, the maintenance and improvements on them, so.
Yes, he has. Yes, he has. And I understand where you're coming from, Councilmember Fall, you know, on the national stage. And
We should get more help.
we should.
with this,
I'm not
so.
disagreeing with you in
Yeah.
the least, but the bridges, I will say that our Department of Engineering and Public Works has done a fine job to stay on top of our local bridges. And again, to chase is probably the wrong word, to apply for grant funding through ODOT to repair our critical infrastructure, i.e. our bridges. We've been very successful with that.
Right. I'd also like to point out that in past projects and this project, they've been very good about keeping access open through the whole process.
Okay, thank you for the comments. Councilmember Butler, yes.
Thank you. I just need a little help conceptualizing, and maybe people in TV land, exactly which small bridge this is.
I believe it's the one adjacent to Stop and Cop and across the street from Ohio University Inn on Richland Avenue.
That's accurate.
Okay, thank you.
It's one that you don't even realize that you're on a bridge when you're driving up or down Richland Avenue, but it is. It's a 46-foot span. But you blink and you're across it, so you don't know that it is there. But there is weight load limits that have been placed on that bridge and have been there for a while, which is why it's critical to get this bridge
Right.
rebuilt.
Okay. Thanks for the questions and comments. Okay. We'll move on to a one-reading resolution, 618. This is a resolution supporting Ohio House Bill 160, the Ohio Fairness Act, which amends Ohio's anti-discrimination laws to include sexual orientation and gender identity or gender expression as protected classes. And I believe Councilmember Crowell can speak to us about this
Sure.
for us.
I'd like to read the resolution. Is that acceptable, President Liz? Whereas the Ohio House of Representatives is currently considering House Bill 160, the Ohio Fairness Act, and whereas House Bill 160 amends Ohio's anti-discrimination laws to include sexual orientation and gender identity or gender expression as protected classes, expanding legal protections in housing, employment, and access to public services, and whereas in 1998, this council reaffirmed its commitment to diversity and inclusion by prohibiting discrimination in housing, employment, and public accommodation on the basis of sexual orientation, and whereas in 2010, this council strengthened its commitment to fairness and tolerance by adding the protected category of, quote, gender identity or expression, end quote, to the city's existing non-discrimination policy. And whereas in 2017, this council enacted a ban on the harmful practice of conversion therapy, prohibiting any, quote, efforts to change sexual orientation or gender identity with a minor, end quote. And whereas the Ohio Fairness Act would empower all Ohio residents to more fully contribute in the workplace, engage in commerce, and participate in civic life without fear of discrimination. Now therefore be it resolved by the City of Athens, Ohio, Section 1, Athens City Council does hereby declare that it strongly supports House Bill 160, also known as the Ohio Fairness Act, and urges members of the Ohio Legislature to act with fairness and justice in ensuring that all Ohioans enjoy freedom from discrimination. Section 2, the Clerk of Council is hereby directed to send a copy of this resolution to Ohio House Speaker pro tempore Kirk Schuring, House Government Accountability and Oversight Committee Chair Louis W. Blessing III, to all other members of the Ohio House Government Accountability and Oversight Committee, and to Representative Jay Edwards. Section 3, this resolution shall be in full force and effect at the earliest moment permitted by law upon its passage and approval by the mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. And you're making a motion to have this approved?
Yes, I'm so
Okay.
moved.
And we have a second. So we do have a motion and second for approval of Resolution 618. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries and the resolution is approved. Thank you. Yes. Oh, Mayor Patterson.
No.
Yes.
Council, if you would please indulge me for a second.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good.
Shall we stand and take a vote?
All right. And I believe that, well, since we have in a special session, we probably do need a motion to adjourn or not?
I motion
Yes.
that we adjourn.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? We are adjourned at 8:42 PM. Thank you so much.